Good afternoon. Welcome to this Gaming in Spain webinar in which we will take a closer look at the recently approved Royal Decree on Safer Gambling. My name is Willem van Oort. 2 weeks ago, Spain's Council of Ministers approved a new Royal Decree that will have a profound impact on the Spanish iGaming market. The new Royal Decree on Safer Gambling introduced an extensive set of duty of care provisions that obligates licensed gambling operators to take additional preventive and remedial measures to protect their players against harmful gambling behavior. These measures include additional restrictions on direct marketing, early interventions, and awareness-raising messaging. In today's webinar, we will discuss how these new regulations will impact Spain's regulated online market. Of course, there's only so much we can do in one brief webinar. If you would like more information, please consider attending our upcoming Gaming in Spain conference, Moving Forward in a Highly Regulated Market, that will take place in Madrid on the 18th of May. That's the 18th of May. Some of the confirmed speakers include Mikel Arana, who is the Director General of the Spanish gambling regulator DGOJ, as well as his immediate predecessor, Mr. Juan Espinosa. Naturally, Spain's regulated industry will be well represented there as well. In short, we've gathered a lot of expertise, and I think there will be a lot of relevant information, as well as a chance to meet all the key decision makers there in Madrid in May. Before we kick off today's webinar, I would like to thank some of our strategic partners: BetConstruct, Ascensi Abogados and Technologies, J Digital, J Digital, and of course our other sponsors, the Chevron Group, MDF Partners, Mindway AI, and Sportradar. Thank you very much for your generous support. We would not be able to do this without your support. As always, our webinars are interactive. If you would like to submit a question to one of our speakers, you can do so through the Slido app. It's a very light app that will install in a few seconds. In order to do that, please scan the QR code on your screen or visit slido.com and enter the event code GIS. Finally, select the Q&A tab on the top of the screen to submit your questions. Questions will be addressed, if possible, and answered during the audience Q&A at the end of this webinar. So scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the event code GIS. With us today, we have 3 expert speakers. I'm welcoming here today Santiago Ascensi, who is managing partner at Ascensi Abogados. Welcome, Santi. We have Jorge Hinojosa, who is Director General of the Trade Association J Digital, J Digital. And we have Alla Serebianskaya, partner at Ascensi Abogados. Welcome, Alla. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here. We are very glad to have you. To properly kick off this webinar, we would first like to get a sense of how you feel about the new Royal Decree. We've prepared a small poll. Again, this is in the Slido app. If you scan the QR code that you see on the screen now, you can participate in the panel, in the poll. To use Slido, please scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the event code GIS. So the poll is live now, and we can start with it. If you click on polls in the app, you can participate in the poll, and we see the first results coming in. So we have put a statement here. Do you think the new Royal Decree on Safer Gambling will help or hurt Spain's regulated iGaming market? We have 3 options here that you can just click on in the app. The first one is overall it will hurt the market more than it helps. The second one, overall it will be a net positive. Or neutral, not sure, as a third option. And while everybody's installing and getting into slido.com, we see the results coming in here. Give this a few more seconds for everybody to have participated in this poll. And I think this will give an excellent backdrop to the general sentiment of today's webinar. So let's leave it at this. It's 50, 25, 25. Overall, It will hurt the market more than it helps. Neutral, not sure as second, and overall net positive as third. Nice result, and thanks everybody for participating. With this in mind, let's hear how our speakers feel about the Royal Decree. Our first speaker today is Santiago Asensi, Managing Partner at Asensi Abogados. Santiago, thank you very much for being here. We very much appreciate it. How are you?
All is good, William. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Welcome, Santi. I think your sound was a little bit far away, but we work on that. First question to you, Santiago. Can you please explain what, in your view, are the main provisions on the new Royal Decree on safer gambling?
Well, thanks again, William, and thank you also to the audience for being here, attending to this webinar, instead of enjoying the sunny day, or the summer weather, I would say, that we have today in Spain. The decree is quite tedious, and the drafting probably can be improved. Okay, so summarizing provisions of this decree is not easy, but I'll try that. I would say that the first thing that it does is introducing new categories or definition of players. VIPs are finally defined, players with intensive behavior, players with are at risk, participants at risk are technically called, young players. That's depending on what is the category where the player is, the decree will apply in one way or another to the participant. Second, I will highlight the fact that since now on, the operator needs to appoint a person who is in charge of safe gambling, okay? And that person cannot be anyone at the company. It needs to be a directive. It needs to be someone at the board of directors with enough power. And it will be the person in charge of developing of the policies of that company in relation to responsible gambling, but also the person in touch with the DGOJ, okay? Then I will highlight also the obligation of having to train your personnel, okay? The company, since now on, no matter what is the post that you are in the company in an operator, you need to be trained in safe gambling matters, okay? And particularly if you are working for that person who is going to be the directive on safer gambling, or are going to be interacting somehow with the players, you will also need to take this training, but on more regular basis, concretely on annual ones. Then the new thing that this decree introduces is the presetting of the gambling session for other games. We had that in the past for slots. Now it's for all casino games. As you know, our license of general license of other games includes poker. Poker is excluded in relation to tournament pokers, but for the rest, you will need to preset up those sessions. Then, depending of what is the category that you are, you belong as a player or participant, whatever they want to call it, you will receive a significant number of messages of communications from the operator to tell you, what this is your monthly report, or this is, you're playing too much, or there will be warnings in the website displayed, etc. And then the one that is calling everybody's attention is the one that is introduced in the third, I think is the final provision of the decree, in which the DGOJ has a term of 2 years to develop a system that detects problematic gambling. The term is 2 years, and that system that is created by the DGOJ will need to be used by all the operators. That's kind of more or less the most important provisions that the decree introduces from my perspective.
There was a lot of clarifying information. Thank you, Santi. Thank you very much. Then this brings us to the second question. How does this latest royal decree fit with the current government's vision of Spain's regulated gambling market? Specifically, can we expect follow-up measures such as, for instance, cross-operator deposit limits? Santi.
But let me start by the end. This morning, and I didn't have too much time to take a look to it, I was in other things, but this morning the DGOJ has has opened a public consultation until the 13th of April in order to gather opinions regarding those deposits limits when it applies to all operators. Okay, until the 13th of April. There's no legislative text. They just want to hear the industry. Perhaps for sure there will be another public consultation once the text has been drafted. Okay. Now that's it. That's it. This royal decree fit with the government's vision of the gambling in Spain? I think it does. I mean, it doesn't surprise anyone that that how are things once again. Yes. First question we should ask ourselves, perhaps, is who is in charge of gambling. And as you might recall, when this government started this mandate, the first thing that they did, one of the first measures that they adopted, was moving gambling from the umbrella of the Ministry of Finance and Public Administrations to Consumer Affairs. Okay, and then they appoint to someone from not from the Socialist Party, but from the Podemos or Communist Party, from the radical left. They put in charge someone from the radical left, one of the business with more capitalist profile, I will say. Okay, so the combination, in order to kick off, is not the best one, but what they are, at the end of the day, a politician, what it needs to do is solving matters to citizens, solving matters to companies, etc. So what's the problem that this government has got? Well, the size of the problem is a percentage of 0.3 of the population in terms of problematic gambling. Okay, with that small percentage, we are receiving, or the industry is receiving, to be more precise, very restrictive, I would say, restrictive decrees. First, it was the one on advertising, and now is this one with on responsible gambling, okay, or on safe gambling. In both cases, it will be convenient to bring what the European Court of Justice has said always in relation to gambling, which is that any measures or any restrictions that are applied, they need to be, first of all, consistent, and second, proportional. And it doesn't seem to be very consistent when you have advertising and not many responsible gambling measures applying to public lotteries. And even if we compare these decrees, particularly this decree on safe gambling, to land-based activity, well, you don't enter into a casino and someone is following you to tell you how much you should spend, to give you a report of how much you have spent during that month in the casino, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so it's not consistent, first of all, and it's not proportional, because the measures that should be adopted in relation to the problem that you have on the table, and the problem that you have on the table is an 0.3% of the total population of Spain on problematic gambling. On the other hand, I believe there are matters that will be perhaps more convenient to address. For instance, I would say that the window for taking applications for licensing window has been closed for a time already, and instead of that, people or companies are being acquired, but without too many, I would say, compliance work in front of that. For instance, if anyone can acquire one of the operators licensed now, and the only obligation of that new acquirent is just to make a post communication to the DGOJ within the time of 1 month. That perhaps is something that should be also address instead of perhaps doing too many decrees or things that are complicating the life of the gambling operators. That's my take.
Okay, I hear you, and thank you for sharing all your thoughts with you. Maybe Santiago, for the consultation, if you can share the link with us after this webinar, we can include it in the post-webinar email, so all the attendees of today will be able to see that.
Sure, I'll send it to you now.
But thank you very much. In the meantime, before we move on to the next speaker, don't forget that you can submit questions to our speakers through Slido. For those who just joined the webinar new, please point to the QR code that you see on the right side of your screen, or go to slido.com, enter the event code GIS, and then select the Q&A tab on the screen to submit your questions. Those questions will be answered, if possible, at the end of this webinar during the Q&A session. For our next question, we move to our second speaker, Mr. Jorge Hinojosa. Mr. Hinojosa is Director General of Trade Association Jota Digital, which represents the interest of Spain's licensed online gambling operators. Jorge, welcome. It is good to have you here. How are you?
Fine, thank you for inviting me to participate in the webinar.
Absolutely welcome. So Jorge, let's start with the first question. How does the regulated industry feel about the latest royal decree?
Well, we don't feel happy, of course. We are living a really hard legislature, 4 years on an intensive normative job work from the regulator, and all the new, not only this royal decree, the commercial communication before, and the new one is coming, as Asensi said before. It's a really hard legislature and very complicated for the gaming sector. Even less than the last Friday, the last intervention of Mikel Arana in the Ministry of Consume, that very hard against with the gambling sector. In fact, the approval of the regulation is complex to understand. There are no reason for this regulation, because Spain is one of the safest and the most security online gambling markets in Europe, even prior to the approval of the regional decree, as I told you. The own Asensi told us before that only the 0.3 is now considered a problematic behavior. The royal decree is a message that follows the trend of hyper-regulation. That's I trying to explain in this a few minutes. That the regulator has been promoting for a long time. It's only respond to political reasons, no feed a social alarm, and is not supported by scientific evidence. The prevalence of problem gambling, and we would not say that, the old national plan on drugs say exactly what we try to do. This royal decree is a very complex regulation that requires time to make change, and technological change is very important, and we have to be detailed enough to do with guarantees and efficiency. But the only reason or the only question that we can say okay to the royal decree is the vacatio legis that we propose. We give to the operator 6 months and in the first step, and 1 year in the second step to implementing this royal decree. We must remind that the industry have always supported the regulation of its activity. We are happy to collaborate with regulation, but we have to be a special place to dialogue, to collaborate, and to be here in the next step that with this is not concluded. At the moment, we have a new step talking about algorithm, talking about the close operator deposit limit. So we have a really hard job in the future, even with the government or con the next government after December election.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for clarifying this to us, sharing your thoughts. Staying with you for now, Jorge. The second question we have to you is, how will the announced measures impact the market? What can operators do to mitigate the impact of the Royal Decree on safer gambling? Your thoughts, please.
Yeah, we requested to the regulator report of the impact on the business of the regulation, and I am still expecting to receive this information. This will help to analyze the consequence and effects of the Royal Decree on the development of gambling company operating in Spain. However, what can we assure is that the new Royal Decree will greatly affect to the internal operation. It will be affect in the internal gambling market, and I think it's going to be another step, not with the stronger market, just the opposite, to go a more even worse market in the future. After over-regulation and over-control of the user's activity may encourage them to seek alternative options for this leisure activity, such as illegal operator, and probably a few players will go to another platform, illegal platform, and probably out of control and less control about the safer behavior. So we have just reading the own news from the regulator in the last year, in the last past month. 180 websites of illegal operators were closed by the DGJ, and 21 fines were presented by unlicensed companies. So we have a problem, and this kind of Royal Decree, like this Royal Decree, is not going to improve the market. It could be a good tool, but without the dialogue with the sector, it's going to be worse for everybody.
Thank you, Jorge. That is quite clear. Some good points there. Thank you very much for now. Some good stuff, as we just said. We'll hear more from Jorge during the audience Q&A at the end of this webinar. Once again, please don't forget that you can submit your questions also to Jorge and other speakers through Slido. Point your mobile to the QR code that you see on the screen, or go to slido.com, enter the event code GIS, and then you see the Q&A tab on the website or in the app where you can add your questions. You can also look at the questions of others and upvote some of the questions that you like from others. Our next speaker is Alla Serebienskaya, partner at Ascensia Abogados, who will help us navigate some of the finer details of the new Royal Decree on safer gambling. Alla, how are you? And welcome to the webinar. I think we have a slight sound issue. Let's try this again, Alla. Can you hear me, Alla?
Yes, sure. Sorry, it was my fault, my microphone. I was saying thank you very much for inviting me to be here.
Absolutely welcome. Alla, starting with the first question and building on some of the information that Santiago and Jorge shared with us, what specific steps should operators take to be compliant with the new regulations? Can you help us with that?
Yes, thank you for your question, Willem. So, well, the steps to be taken by the operators in order to be compliant with this new regulation, in my opinion, are basically two. First one, to have a clear picture and clear understanding of what are the new requirements, new notifications, new obligations to be addressed by the operators, and two, invest in material, human, and technical resources. There is need for business intelligence in order to implement all these new requirements. It is indicated actually in the regulatory impact analysis of the Royal Decree that there are no significant costs associated with the implementation of most of the requirements, because they need to be integrated in the operator's platform. Yes, but in the practice, in the reality, this is not the case. I mean, in order to implement all these automated processes, which are definitely needed, there is a work to be done. There is a technical development which needs to be done by the operators. And in most of the cases, this means to suspend the pipeline of projects for operators and to focus most of their resources on on the Spanish market, on what we need in Spain in order to comply with all the requirements by deadline. Otherwise, implementing the requirements that we have manually would expose the operator to a higher risk, obviously, because there is a high probability of human error. Another thing is that as of today, there is no clarity yet on whether the changes to be implemented need to be certified and homologated before the DGOJ. Normally, and so far, when technical changes come as a result of regulatory updates, changes in the regulations, so changes that are imposed to the operators because of new regulations, operators that are in the market are exempt from going through the so-called substantial change management procedure of the technical systems. But in this case, we are talking about quite a lot of changes on critical components of the technical system. So this could lead maybe to the need of at least updating all the technical documentation describing the technical system of the operator, which is currently in hands of the DGOJ. And last but not least, I believe there are significant changes yet to come, especially from the data model perspective. This new royal decree brings new obligations from the internal control system perspective, new reporting obligations for the operators, new player statuses that will need to be incorporated, that will need to be reported, that will need to be supervised and controlled by the DGOJ. And so I would say there are for sure still new regulations to come, more work and more organizational and technical costs for the operators.
That was a very deep insight answer, Ala, and thank you for sharing that. With regards to the technical certification, curious to hear more, and I'm sure between now and the 18th of May we can learn something more about that. So let's move to the next question. And also Santiago hinted, and in your answer you hinted at that, but let's specifically look, what is the current timeline for implementing these obligations, Ala?
So there are different entry into force periods. Most of the requirements will enter into force in September this year. Those requirements or those new obligations that are more complex from the technical perspective will need to be implemented by March next year. This is the deadline, for example, for new obligations, like as Santiago said, the obligation to setting up the session for all those products under the umbrella of the general license for other games. And as Santiago said, what we have now for slots, which in theory will not be applicable anymore as from that day. That is also the deadline for the operators to adjust their in-play betting product to the new regime, which is also approved in this regulation, the new interpretation for the in-play betting. Also, the deadline in order to implement the limitation for the payment methods for those customers at risk, credit cards prohibited from day one, customers with intensive behavior, credit cards prohibited in 72 hours following the week after the categorization of those players as such. So, I mean, yes, there is a need for automated processes because there are a lot of different deadlines and requirements. Well, in any case, as I said, most of the requirements will enter into force in September. As Jorge said, we are more happy about the vacatio legis that we have now, obviously comparing with the previous draft where all the requirements were about to enter into force the same day of the publication of the decree. But still, we can say that operators now need to work, perhaps not in a record time, but in a short period of time in order to implement all the new obligations, requirements, and in order to be compliant.
Quite a complex matter, and thank you for sharing your insight into this, Ala. Moving to your next question. Reading the royal decree, there's the regular mention of sanctions. So could you summarize what should operators know about possible sanctions and penalties?
So, as it is with the Royal Decree on Gambling Advertising, breaching responsible gambling requirements and player protection obligations is qualified as a serious infraction, which can be penalized by the DGOJ with fines from 100,000 euros to 1 million euros, with the possible suspension of the activity during 6 months in Spain. But what I must say regarding possible sanctions and penalties in Spain is that, fortunately, these have nothing to do with what we are seeing across other regulated markets. Although our regulator is quite proactive at the time of initiating sanctioning procedures against the operators, the truth is that the sanctions imposed, the economic sanctions that are finally imposed, are quite proportional, are quite consistent with the breach committed. It's true that we also have in Spain a formula which is two serious sanctions in 2 years becomes one very serious sanction that can be sanctioned up to 50 million euros. But so far, and according to our experience, we see that the regulator has never applied this formula yet to those infractions or to those sanctions that, let's say, are punctual, exceptional, non-intended. So at least let's hope that in this aspect, let's hope that we continue and we keep on this direction. And well, this doesn't mean that operators don't need to comply with the new Royal Decree and new requirements from day one, because from day one, the DGOJ will be supervising, controlling, monitoring compliance with the new requirements and sending the necessary requests for amendments or for information.
Okay, so no reason for alarm on this topic here. So thank you, Ala. Thank you very much. That was very clarifying. And I think it gave all at home something to think about. Before we move on to our audience Q&A, final quick reminder to our viewers at home or in the office that you can submit your questions to your speakers here through the Slido app or the website. So visit slido.com and enter the event code GIS. Then select the Q&A tab on top of the screen, or open the Slido app by pointing at the QR code on the screen and submit your questions. I'm sure we have some questions coming up here. Welcome back, Santiago and Jorge, to the group here. Let's see if there's any audience questions. Our first question from Slido we have here: can we expect a different approach if the PP wins the next election? Any chance of a new licensing window? I think, Jorge, you have an opinion on it, but Santiago, I think you're looking at the political situation and you spoke about licensing windows. Any thoughts?
Well, from my perspective, I expect a different approach, but I don't expect that anything is removed from what is being done. I mean, let's face it, there's no political party that enjoys regulating gambling. And if we take a look to the past, to what has been happening since the decree was approved, we were very lucky with two of the regulators that we have, and you know, and things are as they are. And gambling is a hot potato, as we say it in Spain, politically speaking, and they do not know what to do with it. And in some cases, you have technical profiles that understand the industry and try to do the best for all the stakeholders, and this includes citizen. And in other cases, you have political profiles, like it is the case now, and where they try to get votes in the next elections. So if the Popular Party wins the next elections, I expect, yes, that the licensing window is open. I think that will happen, but there's something common to anyone who lands at the DGOJ, which is the fact of let him land for 6 months or something like that. So it will not be automatically, it will not be the next day, it will take time. So if we think about that our elections, general elections, should happen in December, until someone is appointed and they take possession, we should be talking about March, April, and then until that person starts to understand get online gambling, we'll be talking about 6 more months, and then he will decide if he opens a window or not. We'll be talking about 2025. That would be an optimistic
Exactly.
angle to see it. I don't know if Jorge
Exactly.
agrees
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah, I'm absolutely agree with you, Santi. Probably it will be much better the how you say the different relation frame. It's not like now it's really hard legislature like I told you before. Probably more space and more moment to share our point of view and to work with the new DG or OJ. In any case, nothing is going to be worse than now. So I am really the only reason to be expecting is really hard at this moment. Nothing worse in the next legislature, and we have two questions to work. We worked with the regulator last week or 2 weeks ago, and we proposed a working group to work specifically in the algorithm. We have 2 years to implement one part of the royal decree and to work about the close operators limit deposit on limit. So nothing is going to change in sensibly, and we can see it, but something better than now. I have to be. I have to be thinking about a new opportunity for this sector. That in any case, this sector has been working during the last 4 years with much responsibility, compromise that the GOJ.
Thank you,
Perhaps
Santi. Thank you, Jorge. Yeah. Quick comment before we move to the next question, Santi.
may I finish?
Yes, please.
Yes, no. What I said is perhaps the situation is finally amended by the Spanish Supreme Court instead of by politicians. Hopefully.
Okay. I think that wraps it up.
Yeah, we hope so.
Topic for ongoing discussion here. Going to the second audience questions here. What are the main changes between the draft and the final versions of the RD, and what are the industries / digital's next steps? So maybe we should not spend too much time on the final version and draft because it's sort of water under the bridge. But Jorge, I guess you are in a good position to answer this.
Yeah, we made in three moments different proposals to the regulator. At the beginning of the process, we have to remind you that this royal decree has been 2 years to get approved and to publish it in the official magazine. So 2 years is many time for one royal decree, and many problems on the way. So we proposed as at the beginning, we made a new proposal when the draft went to the European Commission, and finally when the draft went to the Council of the State. But a few points, of course, like vacatio legis has been much better, but there are 2 questions that are quite complicated to understand. They create a new group of players between 18 and 25 years. It's quite complicated to understand why 25 and why this kind of group of players. And the second one is to put £600 in 3 weeks in a row as general criteria for all people, independent of their situation, their economic characteristics, etc. So how do you put 600 euro for everybody? Why? So there are 2 questions quite complicated to understand and doesn't receive by the GOJ our point of view in any moment.
Thank you, Jorge. Yeah, and I think this answered it perfectly. This question was also upvoted quite a few times. Next question here, very practical question, but a good one here from upvoted 8 times. Who is entitled to who can train operators and their employees on safer gambling? Ala Santiago, Jorge, I don't know who I'm looking at here. I think it's a good question.
Well, I think there is nothing established by the regulation in this regard. I mean, there are no requirements specifically for this, for the training, for who can
Okay.
do the training.
Okay. Well,
Okay,
we'll have to see
Santiago, if you
who-
agree.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. There are no requirements.
But it has to be someone with the appropriate knowledge. But nothing is stated in the regulation for this.
Okay, good. Well, good question, good answer. Let's see if there's one more question that we can spend a minute on. I think this hints what you spoke about, Ala. But of course, Jorge and Santiago, feel free to contribute. How labor intensive will it be to implement the new rules? Ala, you spoke about technology resources and human resources. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I believe that according to some conversations that we have with different operators, I believe there are different scenarios in different cases. There are some operators who perhaps have started to work already on the previous draft and are about to implement most of the changes. There are other operators that perhaps do not see the new requirements in Spain that complex because they are already in other regulated markets that have stricter and more complex requirements on responsible gambling. But at the time, they have good opportunities for marketing and advertising. Just something worth mentioning. And there are different cases, but in any case, I believe that there are other operators who simply see a complexity on the fact of having to automate certain notifications via email, then perhaps doing it through a pop-up. So I think this is also a technical matter, which is not under my control at 100%, but I believe it is obviously complicated, a lot of work to do, resources to invest, and technical developments for sure.
Anything to add, Santi or Jorge?
Yeah, just only to complement one comment. The DGOJ is very lucky with the Spanish operator. I mean, operator with Spanish license. Operator have been working during the last year, preparing everything internally, the new culture of the gambling, the safer gambling. It's not going to be probably the same for the different operator, but we have a really good operator in Spain working and doing things very well. So they will do with complicated procedimental changes, technological changes, etc. But I think in the last year, the operators have been working in this direction, and we have to be. It's my job just to say the operator in Spain are doing things good.
Good. Thank you, Jorge. Santi?
No, nothing else. I just wanted to say, different to this question that I put the link that you asked me for in the group chat. So if you want to take it from there to the rest of the audience, it's posted already.
Yeah, we'll include it in the post webinar newsletter tomorrow that we will distribute with the video. So thank you, Santiago. Not sure if there's still a quick last question. We're at 44 past the hour. If there's a quick question. Yeah, last question. What are the critical components that may be affected by the royal decree? I think we went into quite a few things on that as well from a technical and resource level. Anything to add, Ala, Santiago, Jorge?
The critical components of the technical system, I guess, and this is something that I have mentioned, and this is something that for sure will need to be reviewed more in detail in order to understand from the technical perspective what are the changes on critical components, but for sure there are one of them is basically the change on the setting up of the session. I mean, this is an absolute a huge change on the platform, and more of them which involve information for the participant and changes that usually, if not because imposed by the regulation, would need to be certified.
Yeah. Jorge, Santiago, if you have nothing to add, I would like to leave this as the last question of today. We're running out of time. We've taken 45 minutes of everybody's time. And let's wrap up this webinar. Thank you so much, Santiago, Jorge, and Ala, for answering your viewers' questions in your session and in the Q&A now. We hope to see you in Madrid or participate in maybe a new webinar. We see there's some good questions. We can run another one. Of course, as I mentioned before, there will be more to discuss at the upcoming Gaming in Spain conference, where you can also hear directly from the head of DGOJ as well as other major stakeholders. Please consider making it to Madrid on the 18th of May and join us there. You can book your tickets now. The website is open at gaminginspain.com. Some of the speakers, sorry, forgot that will be speaking. Some of the faces you've seen here today will appear and will be present in Madrid. Speeches, coffee breaks, networking, and we'll go for a dinner at night. So hope to see you in Madrid. Last but not least, if you are not yet on our mailing list, please get to our mailing list. That will get your newsletter, your regular newsletter, straight into your email box, and our magazine to your doorstep. That's at Gaming in EU, so www.gamingin.eu. Very easy to subscribe. Subscribe for a second if you're not on the mailing list, and you'll be in good company. I can guarantee that. Thank you for attending the webinar. Thank you, and we hope to see you in May in Madrid. Thank you very much.